Shout out to everybody who knows what this is. If you know, you know. Let's get started. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Charles with Detail Lab, and in today's video, we're going to be going over all the equipment that you need to start polishing your vehicle. From polishers to polishes, compounds, pads, clay bar, lights, paint depth gauge, and more. So if you're ready to start polishing, this is the video for you. This video is going to be going over the tools and equipment needed to polish, not so much the polishing process itself. If you're interested in the polishing process, I am making a paint correction 102 video, so make sure you subscribe down below and hit that notification bell to be alerted when that video comes out. All right, let's talk about polishers. So you have three different categories of polishers. You have your main workhorse. This is going to be either a 5 or 6 inch pad depending on the company. This one is going to be your polisher that you use for probably 85% of a vehicle. I personally use the Adams SK Pro line of polishers. I will get more into that later. You have a 3 inch polisher, so this is going to get into those little bit tighter areas that your 5 or 6 inch cannot get into. You also have a micro polisher, and most micro polishers use a 1 inch pad. So this is going to get into those very tight areas, hard to reach areas. A couple examples I can think of off the top of my head would be like the air intakes on like the sides of C8 Vettes and Lamborghinis and Ferraris, something where this polisher would be too wide to fit into. So this one, if you can see, is way more narrow than the 5 inch and even the 3 inch. So this is going to get into those tighter areas better. Now I use the Adams SK Pro 15 millimeter as my main workhorse. It has not let me down yet, and this is the same polisher that I used at Barrett-Jackson, polishing probably for 60 hours, and it never let me down. So I'm very impressed with the SK Pro line. They have interchangeable power cords, so you don't need two separate power cords for your 15 and your 12 millimeter or your 5 inch and your 3 inch. You can just unplug from your 15 and then plug it right in to your 12. Very convenient, so you don't have a ton of cords laying around everywhere. That's very annoying. I will probably be purchasing a Rupes LHR 21. Once you get really comfortable using a polisher, you want to upgrade into a larger throw. So this is a 15 millimeter. So that means the distance the backing plate travels from one side to the other when the machine is on is how that is calculated. So this is a 15 millimeter. So the higher that number, the more surface area that is being worked at a time with the polisher. So the more work you can get done with the bigger throw, right? A 15 millimeter throw is going to do more work in the same amount of time as a 12, and then the 21 obviously will do more work than the 15 and the 12. The Adams Polishes SK Pro 12 millimeter is a 3 inch machine. It does not have a progressive trigger like the 15 millimeter. So the 15 millimeter has a trigger where you can lightly squeeze it and it will start at a low RPM, and then you can progressively pull that trigger down to wide open, and you can even lock the trigger to where you don't have to be squeezing it while you're working. The 3 inch machine does not have that. It has a side slide button, so you can click it on. It does, however, have a slow start feature, which whenever you turn the machine on, it ramped up slowly until that hits that full RPM. And both of these machines have RPM wheels on them. They go from 1 to 6. I like to have mine at 5 for the most part with the 5-inch machine and the 3-inch machine. And then lastly, we have the SK Pro Micro. This machine is very, very handy. It also, you can get a rotary attachment tool, which I have, and it turns it into a little rotary machine with the extended tool head, so you can get into really tight areas and intricate areas. But this machine right here is a great tool to have in your arsenal. If you're just starting out though, I would highly recommend this be your last purchase. I would go with a 21 or 15 millimeter machine, and then if your budget allows, also get a 12 or 3-inch machine. But if your budget allows to have a micro, this is a great machine. The kit itself from Adams comes with 2 batteries that are rechargeable, and you can also buy a dummy battery that goes into the machine and then plugs into an outlet so you have continuous power or you don't have to worry about the battery dying. But this tool also has a progressive trigger, so you can squeeze it. And then it also does have a trigger lock, so you can squeeze the trigger, lock the machine, and then it is running without having to squeeze the trigger. All right, let's talk about pads that you will be using with these machines. Now, these pads are not specific to the Adams machines. These pads will fit any machine that has a 5-inch backing plate, a 3-inch backing plate, or a 1-inch backing plate. And I'm going to go from least aggressive to the most aggressive pad. So starting off, we have your polishing pads, and I will link everything I talk about in the description box below so you don't have to worry about keeping track of everything. But you're gonna have your soft foam polishing pads. So these are gonna be the least aggressive pad, and what I mean by that is it's going to take the least amount of clear coat off. These are really just for really polishing or bringing out some depth in the paint, and not so much removing scratches. These are really soft foam pads, and they're not gonna heat up as much and get into those deeper scratches. These are mainly for after you get done compounding and there's a little haze left, to clear up the haze. Or if you're just doing maybe an enhancement and you just want to bring back some depth in the paint, that's what the soft polishing pads are for. Next up, we have the blue foam pads. These are the Adams Polishes compound pads. Now, I consider these a intermediate pad. I don't consider these a very strong cutting pad, but they're also a little bit stiffer than the polishing pads. So they're gonna get a little bit better cut. Now, I will say we use this pad a lot at Barrett-Jackson. We use this pad with compound together, and if it's not on like a black or dark vehicle, it works very, very good. If it's on like a darker colored vehicle, it will leave some hazing, and you have to go back behind with a polishing pad or use a different polish with the pad, and we'll go over that later. So these are gonna be a step up from the white polishing pads. If you're starting out, I highly recommend you get a set of the blue foam pads and the white foam pads to start learning paint correction. The more aggressive you get, the higher chance there is to burn through the paint, but we will talk about that later. Next up in my arsenal of pads are the Eurofiber, I call them the Oreo pads. These pads right here paired with 3D1 is a killer one-step system. It is very, very widely used in detailing as a one-step. It has a very, very nice cut to it, and it also finishes down really well and doesn't haze anywhere near as bad as like a heavier compound when using with 3D1. All right, next up in my arsenal of pads are these Adams Polishes microfiber pads. These are gonna be more on the cutting side. You're gonna wanna use it with either a compound or a heavy cut compound. This is gonna remove more defects in the paint, some heavier scratches than the foam pads will remove. And then last but not least is the wool cutting pads from Adams Polishes. These are very aggressive pad. These are gonna heat up very quickly. I do not recommend beginners starting off using the wool pad. I would wait till you get comfortable with learning how paint reacts and how to use the machine before you start using the wool pads, but they are fantastic for getting rid of those deeper scratches and swirls. All right, next up we'll talk about polishes and compounds, starting with polish. So like the pad, the polish is not gonna remove much scratches or swirls. This is mainly to clean up haze from the compounding phase or to give the paint some depth. But as far as cleaning up any scratches or swirls, this is not going to be it. Adams does claim that it removes 2,000 to 2,500 sanding scratches and finer, but I honestly would not use it to clean up sanding scratches. I would use it only to clean up some hazing done by the compound. Next up, we have Adams Polishes Compound. This is going to be used mainly with your blue foam pad or your microfiber and wool pad. I use 3D1 probably the most. If you know me personally, you know how much I love 3D1. I use it with the Eurofiber pads, and honestly, this is a very versatile polish slash compound. It's a hybrid, so you can use it even with like the wool pad for a cut, and then use that same 3D1 on a foam pad for a final pass or a cleanup pass. Very, very versatile. I highly recommend if you're wanting to get into polishing, get yourself some 3D1. Next up is the Meguiar's 205. I honestly don't use this anymore, but it is a good option, and it's also pretty readily available at like Harbor Freight and auto parts stores. So if you're in a pinch, then it's a great product, but I don't really use it much anymore, but I wanted to tell y'all about it. And then finally, we have Adams Polishes Heavy Cut Compound, and that's going to be your most aggressive compound. This is reserved for super scratched up, swirled vehicles, very aggressive. You have to be very cautious when you're using a heavy cut compound, not just Adams, but any heavy cut compound. You got to be careful and make sure you're comfortable with the machine, and make sure you understand what you're doing when you're using any type of heavy cut with like a wool pad or a microfiber pad. All right, moving on, let's talk about cleaning up the paint before you start polishing. So you're going to want to get yourself some clay bars. Now you can use a clay mitt or a clay towel, but if it is a more embedded contaminant, then you're going to want to get yourself some clay bars. I like the fine grade from Adams. They're all the same, but you're gonna want to get yourself a clay bar set, and then you will use either some type of detail spray, like quick detail spray, or clay lube, or waterless wash, whatever your preferred method of clay lube is. I personally like detail spray or hoseless wash is my favorite clay lubes. Or if you're doing it while you're washing the vehicle, you can use your soapy water. Just grab yourself a microfiber towel, dunk it in that water, and then squeeze that water out on the panel, and then clay bar that panel. If you're clay barring though, make sure that you are polishing after you clay bar, because clay bars are pretty aggressive and they will mar the paint. All right, next up we got a brush, a stiff bristle brush to clean the pads out. I will go over more about cleaning the pads out in 102, but you're gonna wanna get yourself a stiff bristle brush, or if you have an air compressor, you can use compressed air and blow out your pads. All right, lighting. Lighting is very important whenever you are paint correcting. You can get these handheld lights from ScanGrip or Adams, or there's probably 100 companies that sell the same exact light. You can get yourself a handheld one. This is very versatile while paint correcting and also just everyday detailing or everyday life. It's super bright. It has different light settings on it for the different temperatures of light. You can also get yourself these little cheap headband lights that can go on your head, and then you have light wherever you're looking. And then also a stand light. This is the Adams Polishes light. You can get a ScanGrip light, you can get whatever brand you want, but it's nice to have. Next up, we'll be talking about some towels. So you're gonna want to get yourself some plush towels. I use the Adams Polishes plush towel, their borderless gray towel. And then I also have a towel from my local supplier that's a 550 GSM towel that I like using. So what I'll do is after I get done polishing or compounding, I'll do my initial wipe with the plush towel, the white plush towel, and then I'll go back behind that with either the borderless gray or my orange towel and do my final wipe down. You're going to want to get yourself some type of surface prep spray, whether you're applying some type of sealant or ceramic coating after you get done polishing. This surface prep spray will make sure you get all of the polishing oils off of the surface, so that way it is a nice clean surface for whatever you're putting on to bond to. I personally use denatured alcohol and distilled water mixed together. This mix is 16 ounces of 91% alcohol into a gallon jug, and then fill the rest up with distilled water. Then last but not least, when we're talking about equipment for paint correcting, is a paint depth gauge. This is very important. I wish I would have bought one sooner than when I did, but a paint depth gauge will tell you the total thickness of the primer, the base color coat, and the clear coat on top, and that will give you a rough idea of how much clear coat you have to work with, right? If it's in that 3.5 range mils thick, then you know you don't have too much to work with. And then if it's up in that thicker range, you know, that 5 or so, you know, you have a little bit more playroom to work with. This will just give you some peace of mind knowing how thick the paint is and how you're supposed to go about tackling that specific paint. It will also give you a PDF file of all the spots that you measure, and then that way you can send to the customer, so the customer even has a record of their paint depth, which is really cool. And some of my customers have honestly been blown away by that. So making the investment in a paint depth gauge is a good idea. All right, that is all of the equipment that is needed to get started paint correcting. But there's a couple more things I want to go over. So a lot of people, when they get started paint correcting beginning, think that you can only use the blue compound with the compounding foam pad. But in reality is you're gonna have to experiment with different compounds or polishes with different pads, right? There's not one polishing pad, polish combo, compound combo that work for every vehicle. Some vehicles have super hard clear coat that needs a more aggressive approach, and some have very soft clear coat where you can get away with a less aggressive approach. But there's not a one size fits all that works perfect for everything. Yes, the Eurofiber pad and the 3D1 is a fantastic combo that works well with most vehicles, but If it's like a GM black vehicle, you're gonna have a rough day. Most GM black vehicles are gonna require a full two-step where you're just gonna be wasting your time trying to do a one-step. But that is the big problem I see with people starting off is they don't think about experimenting with different pads and polishes, right? It all depends on the paint and doing test spots on the vehicle before you get started to know what combo works best and is gonna save you the most amount of time. And one more thing, I almost forgot, super important when you're polishing is some type of detail seat or stool or bucket or something. I personally have a Harbor Freight detail stool. It has wheels on it where I can roll around the vehicle. Maybe I'm doing a larger door and I can actually scoot or slide as I'm polishing where I don't have to move my arms back and forth. Because after a while, I'll tell you, this polisher gets kind of heavy if you have to sit here and do this right here. So it's nice to have this polisher like this and then just glide back and forth on a stool. So having a good, comfortable stool is very important. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap this one up. If you found any type of value, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It helps me out. It shows me that y'all are enjoying this content. Now, I'm gonna leave links to everything in the description box below. And disclaimer, they will be affiliate links. So if you buy it through that link, it helps me out a little bit with no extra cost to you. But everything will be linked down below. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything detailing related you would like to see me cover.